Hello. This is the second step in an activity where we are developing a GUI-based program that calculates the volume of a cylinder. And in our previous step, we built a function that just does the math that we can call upon. In this step, we're going to actually build the front end. It's not actually going to function. It's not going to do anything yet. We're just going to write our program so that we get this image popped up on the screen. Now, for those of you in my design class and you're using this as a way to kind of develop your skills, one thing that's really important to think about is you want to make sure you've had a conversation with your client and you've asked them what the front end experience might look like. You can ask them about color. You can ask them about position of the different elements. You can ask them about size of font. It's really important to remember when you're building this not for yourself but for someone else. And so you really want to kind of get at what it is that they want. For example, if I was building this, say, for a math teacher, maybe they want the input as diameter, not radius. Maybe they want the option to swap between inputs. Be prepared for them to make requests that you don't know how to do yet. And that's part of the process we're going through. We're going to identify what technical skills we might have to learn in order to be successful in creating this prototype for our client. So let's dive in. What I've talked to I've made my sketch, and what we want is we want to have a title up here. We want to have the radius, a title, an input box, a title, an input box, some sort of output box, and then a button we're going to hit calculate, and then a high contrast button. The high contrast button is going to eventually change the background colors so that it's easier to read for people. All right, so we're going to do this using what's called tkinter. Tkinter is a pre-built package that has a whole bunch of really useful predefined pieces of code to create widgets or elements. And they usually use the same step no matter which one you're building. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to save this file, save as. I'm going to call it, make sure I get my naming right, GUI vol sil step 2.py. And I'm going to take the code from step 1. I'm going to copy all of that code and I'm going to paste it in here to step 2. I'm going to get rid of a lot of the comments just to kind of clean up space a bit. Okay. So in the last step, we built essentially this function that we can invoke to calculate the radius and the height. So once we get our front end all kind of built up, when I click this calculate button here, it's going to take the value from radius, it's going to take the value for the height, pass it into the function, generate the volume, and then output it. But first, we have to build this. So let's start by removing any code from this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to pull up my terminal here. Let's clear this. And I'm going to say Python 3 GUI vol sil step 2.py. Perfect. Nothing happens. And remember, the reason nothing happens is because all I have is a definition, but I have no code. So I'm going to import a module called tkinter. Tkinter is a really popular module for making quick GUIs. There's lots of better ones out there, and there's lots of more advanced ones out there, but what's really nice about it is it allows you to kind of start to develop some good programming fundamentals. And so the way tkinter works is essentially you make your root window, which is the main window where everything is going to sit, and then you start putting what are called widgets in, or different elements. So for example, Sublime Text, this window here, this big window with the close, minimize, maximize button, this is your root window. And then all these elements inside are widgets. So this would be a widget here, each of these tabs would be a widget, and that's how you build it. So the first thing we do is we're going to put some main code down here. So this is where the program starts. And I always build what's called a root window, and I do this by saying root, and I like to import tkinter as tk. It just helps me kind of organize, especially when I'm learning new things. And I'm going to go into the tk module, and I'm going to run this function called tk. Now you might scratch your head and say, well, what is that? Well, this is a special function that does everything that's needed to build a root window. It's going to build the frame, it's going to put the close button, it's going to put the minimize, the maximize. And so if I save this and I run it, oh, I ran the wrong one. Step 2.py, there we go, that's better. It runs, but nothing happens. The reason nothing has happened is because what I need to do is I need to take the root and I need to run what's called the main loop. This essentially puts your program into a continual loop, and it sits there waiting for you to do something. So if I come back here and I run this, there's my root window. And essentially the program is sitting there just kind of waiting for something to happen. We're building what's called an event-driven program. An event-driven program means that when an event happens, such as a mouse click, a keyboard press, some collision, it could be a number of things, the movement of your mouse, some function is called that causes a change in state. Now, it's really important to understand here that when the program reaches this point, it sits there. So if I do something like a print and program, and I save, and I run this again, notice how end program hasn't showed up. And that's because the program is sitting here just waiting for an event to happen. So now if I put this back, let's pull that back up, and let's pull our window back up. The minute I close this window, watch what happens. End program. Often what students do when they're starting to do this is they start programming below here, and they get really confused because nothing's happening. And that's because when this line is reached, it kind of takes over the computer. So we have to build all the widgets. So we're going to build the widgets and place them in the root before the main loop. That's kind of the idea. We're going to build everything up, and then we're going to kind of put everything together and then run the main loop, and it's going to pop up. And roughly speaking, there are 3 steps for every widget. Step 1 is we construct the widget. And what that is essentially these widgets are pretty complicated things, just like the root window is. We're going to run a function that's going to go and do all the necessary kind of back-end programming to build this widget. Step 2, which is optional, we don't always have to do it, we're going to configure the widget. And this is doing a number of things that we might need to do to make it look nicer. We could change the color, we could change the font, a bunch of different things could happen here. And then step 3 is we're going to place the widget in the root window. And I'm going to say really what we do is we pack it. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm going to use the most simplest technique to do this, and it's called pack. And what pack means is it just takes it and places it into the window using some predefined rules. There's a bunch of different ways to kind of move your different widgets around. So if we go back and look at our original picture, you'll see the first widget at the top is what's called a label widget. So let's create that. So I'm going to make a variable called title. We always make a variable for a widget, and I say tk dot, and I call the label function. So this is called a constructor. It's a special function that constructs something. It builds it the first time. And I always have to pass the parameter root, which is essentially the window it's going to go into. And then I have these things called named parameters. Named parameters are parameters that I give a name to. Calculator. And what that does is when it passes in, because it has a variable name associated with it, it knows what to do with it. You could give this a variety of parameters. We're just going to give it 1. I'm now going to config this, so I'm going to say title.config. And again, the config takes name parameters, and when you go online, you'll find these and you'll learn them pretty quickly. And I'm going to say fg equals red, that means foreground color, and background color, bg equals black. And then the last thing I have to do is I have to place the widget in the root window. So I'm going to say title.widget. And I like to use this name parameter fill, and I'm going to fill both horizontally and vertically. I'm just going to fill up that root window. So I say tk.both. And this is just a special constant that says fill, take this widget and fill it in. And in fact, let's actually just get rid of it first, and then we'll run the program. So let's delete this. Let's give this a save. Give this a run. And there we get cylinder volume calculator. So this is the title for our piece. Now if I come back here and let's put this in, if I go pack, and I'm going to pack fill equals tk.both. So again, tk is the module, it's shorthand for tkinter, and I'm using some constant called both. And that's a special instruction. It's actually a number that tells it to do. You'll notice, I have to close this to get control back. You'll notice it's had no difference. It made no difference in it. I put this in partly just so it is default to help with as I add the other widgets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually stop this video because it's getting a little long, and I'm going to continue on this second step. I hope this video helped, and I hope you continue to watch.